Since then, I've recently in New York, I went to grad school there, got my MA in entrepreneurial journalism, did a fellowship for the Town Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism, where I started the idea for Go Baller, and recently went through the Bizdom Accelerator, where we got a $25,000 investment from Bizdom, which was founded by Dan Gilbert, who owns the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers. So kind of the progress I've made over the last couple of years, and I'm happy to go into more detail as we go on. But that's kind of how I'm here and where I came from.
Hello, my name is Kate Albright-Hanna. I was at CNN for 7 years. I was a documentary film producer there. In 2007, I joined the Obama campaign, and I was their head of online video. After that, I went to Vice for a year, and I
Hispanicize for having us here. It's a real honor just to share what we can with y'all, and all of us panelists really want y'all to walk away with as much info as you can here. So please use this and abuse this as you need. My background before being a technology CEO was in creative media and the arts. So I went to undergrad for film school. I worked at TV stations as a camera jockey, did some indie film work, and had kind of hit a ceiling. I wasn't growing as fast as I thought that I would, and I was also feeling a little burnt out, frankly, too, in that role. I moved to New York City, went back to graduate school, and in 2009 I launched Rocket Hub with my co-founders. And we're now one of the world's largest crowdfunding platforms on a global scale, which is kind of crazy 5 years later. And then well into, in 2013, we hit a tipping point with the company, and I get this phone call from A&E Networks, and the phone call was something like this. Hey, Brian, this is some executives over at A&E, and we just saw you on the front page of the USA Today's Money section, and we're really interested in an integrated partnership where we would use your community to kind of tell their stories on our 100 million television sets across North America. We want to fund some of these projects and really do an integrated partnership. Is that something you might be interested in? And I was like, yes. I mean, how fast can I meet you? So it was kind of an interesting way for me to get back into television and media through this technology and the community that we built in the crowdfunding front.
Right, and so I think what's interesting, much information to choose from. Twitter, Facebook, television stations, cable, whatever the case may be. And I think that as we move forward, what we need is people that can help us to understand it, journalists that can help us to understand, because I think what we need to remember is that always from the time that the printing press was invented, journalists have been there to help curate the news, curate the information, to make sure that the important topics get covered as well as the fun topics. And so what we see today is just an overflow of information, and I think that can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be a kind of the matter is we live in one of the safest times in our society. We just see a lot more of the violence that's going on. We have more access to education, even though it's not as evenly distributed as we'd like. We have more food available, but it needs to be distributed more evenly. So what I'm saying is, here are some people that are thinking about all the information that exists in the web and trying to organize it so that people can get what they need. So Chris, if you don't mind, why don't you, Chris is the founder of Go Baller, which is a application that curates social media. So if you're interested in the Cleveland Cavaliers team, or you're interested in basketball, or you're interested in football, Christelle has invented an application that will be useful to you as a user to see all the information that you'd like to see, but it's also going to be useful to places like ESPN, places like CNN, that need to keep their users informed, but may not have the manpower to be curating social media all day long. So, Chris, why don't you sort of like demonstrate a little bit about your app and tell us a little bit of how it works?
Sure. Yeah, so Go Baller is a social discovery app for sports fans.
They don't have the, responsibilities of family, a mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. They can get out there and they can experiment. And I say, go out and develop something on your own. Go out and develop a way that you can tell your story the way that you want to tell it, whether it's developing an app, whether it's like really diving into a topic that's really interesting to you. Go out and do that. That way you can build yourself up rather than immediately jumping into a mainstream media company and basically, pushing content that other people have. The web and Twitter and the social media world about what information people want to see, there's also this idea of journalists out there working independently
I mean, there's a lot of journalists out there who are, they're losing their institutional support that they've come to rely on in newsrooms, and so that's part of what I want to do, which is create those social supports that were there for journalists who had, regular jobs that they would go to that had also wanted to see something come out of it. So it's called Tarbell after Ida Tarbell, who was a female muckraking reporter, who did this 19-part series on the Standard Oil Company, and it led to actually the enforcement of the antitrust laws that up to that point hadn't really been used. So that's what I'm interested in, not only giving journalists a social support, but also empowering them and getting them connected with other people who are using tools in interesting ways to make an impact on the world.
Yeah, so imagine as an independent journalist working in Miami that you want to join into a newsroom of other independent journalists, as well as maybe graphic designers and perhaps web designers, where you can sit, write your story, and already there have an informal network of people who are going to help you to put your story out there. Imagine if there was a room like that, they'd need a big lobby, because I'm imagining that a lot of people would be there waiting to meet with them to get their story out. And it sounds like a really, really powerful thing and a really, really grassroots, community-oriented initiative, which I think is fantastic. And that brings me to Brian, because Brian runs Rocket Hub, a crowdfunding site. So what's he doing here talking about, the next news startup, but the truth of the matter is the next news startup, A, is not going to look like anything that we know today, and B, it's going to need to make its money somehow. So C, Brian comes from a news background, so he's seen it from both sides. So I want Brian to sort of talk to us a little bit about how he sees the merging of media and news, which are two different things, actually. When you think about it, media is how stuff gets put out there, and news is journalism. So, we like to conflate the two things, but they're actually very separate and different.
Well, that's a great question, and that's one of the cool things about my job at Rocket Hub is seeing all the cool projects that come through our doors. Kate, a few years ago, did some crowdfunding for Tarbell and was very successful with it, and also being out in the real in the real world, out from behind a computer, connecting with real people is also a real joy for me. But the model for building things yourself really comes first from, I think, a pioneering mindset, right? So, whether you're a journalist looking to shift gears, whether you're an entrepreneur looking to kind of find, the opportunities, just know that before you take any steps, you're going to have to kind of look through that lens of what can we pioneer here? What expertise can I bring to the table from my past, and my skill set, and apply that to this new thing? And crowdfunding is a really great way to kind of test those ideas. I like to think of crowdfunding as really community funding. The world knows it as crowdfunding, but I always think of it as kind of a way to galvanize communities for funding, awareness, and feedback. And all those things are really important for the next new startup, right? You want to get the funding to get the thing up to snuff, or get some seed funding happening. You want to get awareness using the crowdfunding event to kind of get some press and get some, get your network galvanized. And then you want to get feedback on what people think of it. Are they funding it? Are they not? If not, why? If yes, why? So I think crowdfunding can be a great tool. It's an elastic tool that fits a lot of different models, but it definitely fits, folks that are looking to launch new news applications, new news startups, and the general media, in general media as well. I mean, if you look at our partnership with A&E, we have a documentary coming out on A&E later this year that follows the story of Rocket Hub and a few key stories that have come through our gates as well. Is that news? I would say that it is. Is it stories? I mean, A&E is in the storytelling business, and through this partnership, they now have this funnel of amazing stories that they get to look at and cherry pick which ones they want to do more with. So what I'm seeing is this kind of bottom-up phenomena of communities kind of rallying around people with great ideas, and now I'm starting to see this top-down phenomena too of companies, of media companies specifically, looking at our site and saying, I want to pick this one, and I want to do this with it. I want to pick this one, I want to do this with it. So it's a pretty exciting time for folks looking to jump into the entrepreneurial game.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I want to touch on is the sacrifices that these folks are making, especially the journalists here are making in terms of their careers. Because as journalists, I think we're all interested in telling stories. So when you become an entrepreneur, that means that sometimes needs to take a back seat to the stories that you tell, because you have to run a business. You have to get money. You have to really, really work it. By the way, if you have questions, write them down, because we will be opening this up to questions in a bit. But I wanted to talk to you guys, I think we discussed this a little bit earlier today, about the sacrifice as a journalist, as a storyteller. Now you're running a business. So, Chris, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you're mitigating your desire to be a journalist and tell a story versus your actual self being an entrepreneur now?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think that it started off, as I said earlier, I was writing sports for about almost a decade in Florida. Started off as I was 15 years old. I was getting bylines every week. I was writing a weekly Sports for Kids column, covering a lot of youth sports. It kind of became my beat. And then I decided to take the sacrifice to move to New York for grad school to get my master's. And I really wanted to do this fellowship program about media innovation and launching your own media startup. And I left a well-paying job to basically take out $50,000, $60,000 in loans to live in New York. And the last 2 years, I basically went from writing for good money to writing for free for a lot of publications, working with the New York Times on a lot of collaborative fronts, interning for the New York Daily News on their sports desk. But it was worth it. And then on top of that, taking another risk that once we were done with our fellowship program, I built a prototype, a pitch deck, and I really wanted to make it real. You're pitching it constantly, why not go all the way with it? And instead of, you mentioned earlier, taking that risk, a lot of students in my position, we're in our mid-20s, some older, some younger. Everyone wants to get out and get that job right away and start getting a paycheck right away. And that's fine, but the growth that you can have in your career is going to be pretty slow. I mean, looking at newsrooms, if I would have stayed at the Sarasota Herald Tribune, I started when I was 15, I'd be there 35, 40 until I actually could do something more than what I was already doing. We see that a lot in newsrooms all over, especially in executive leadership positions. Taking a step away from journalism is the best thing I ever did, because you're constantly in the grind of writing daily content, blog posts, daily beat stories. It really takes away the time, the creativity that you could put into another effort. And I think that doing that really helped me focus on this project alone. And I definitely don't have any regrets. I mean, you're living a life of uncertainty, you're taking a lot of risks, but I tell you, the rewards so heavily outweigh those things that you don't even really think about it that much.
Yeah, but Kate, you had some good thoughts about as a storyteller, and now how you transition from storyteller to entrepreneur, and how do you see that transition happening in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes really miss just focusing on directing and producing a documentary. I spent 2 years in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, reporting on police shootings there in the wake of the hurricane, and I missed that sort of attention and just pure journalism and storytelling. But sadly, at the end of that process, I felt like within the CNN corporate structure, I lost creative control, and the documentary actually didn't turn out the way that I really wanted it to. I actually went back to Frontline, and they ended up doing a great series called Law and Disorder, and finally the vision was realized. But for me, that was just a very heartbreaking experience where I realized I was going to have to create my own foundation for doing the kind of stories that I want to do. So that's That's what I'm doing now, sort of brick by brick, trying to build a foundation where you could do quality storytelling. And sadly, you know, the long-form documentary unit doesn't even exist anymore, and that's a trend across all media, which is, you know, they're just not investing in that sort of quality journalism anymore. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually at CNN, what we've done is we're now buying documentaries, which is great, I think. I mean, I support that. I'm not against that. I think that if there are people out there who are making the documentaries, then why not buy them from them if they fit into what we want to do. But there are risks associated with this type of thing. And Brian, I think as somebody who has been through the gauntlet of startup and now, I mean, you're the third largest crowdfunding site on planet Earth. You know, that's a huge deal. Like you are, it's amazing, and I commend you for that because I know how hard you've had to work. So I promised you guys some real talk, right? So how did you make it happen? What was it like in the early days, and how is it now? How are you living?
You know, that's a good question that a lot of folks, I don't think anyone's asked me publicly before, so this is real talk. When you first launch a company, it is this combination of utter excitement and then kind of some fear, right? Like, all right, I've done this, now I've got to deliver. And you have so much uncertainty on what's going to happen. One day you're on the front page of, you know, the paper. The next day the deal you thought was going to happen falls through, and you know you just have these wild ups and downs. I will say for the first couple of years at Rocket Hub, you know, I did not receive any income. So I had prepared for that. I have a wife who has a stable job in the world of academia. We had prepared for 1 year of no income. And then it ended up being a little longer than we thought, but I knew it was around the corner. So just mitigate the risk, kind of know what you're getting into, recognize that there may be some time where you're sacrificing, as Chris said, kind of the steady paycheck. You're kind of investing in yourself and in your endeavor for, you know, for kind of a hopefully a bigger gain. And but just know, you know, it is a roller coaster ride, and a lot of folks may not have the intestinal fortitude to be founders, and that's okay. That's actually a good thing to know, because there are a lot of one of the great things about what's happening trend-wise across the nation is that there are startups that you could join and you can help, and you could be one of 4 or 5 people that are doing something really, really cool. Sure, maybe you'll have a little less pay than you will in the open market, but you're getting a steady paycheck and you're getting a stake in something that could be the next big thing. So that might be another route to explore, would be to joining forces with an emerging superstar that you get excited about. But just know that it's going to be ups and downs, and you know, kind of plan for a certain period of time where, you know, you're going to be tightening the belt.
Great. So I want to open it up to you guys to see if there's anybody that has any questions about getting started. Maybe you have an idea that you want to develop a little bit, and you want to talk to these guys about how they got their start going. So let me just put it out there. Are there any questions at this point from the audience?
Hi, my name is Sarah Batista, and I can sort of relate to all of you on some sort of level. I was a television news reporter for 10 years, and I left about 1.5 years ago to start a video and film production company called Stories to Inspire. So essentially, I got tired of telling the bad news. I was a crime and court reporter. And so my question, though, is I'm in the middle of producing an independent documentary, and we've started a crowdfunding campaign. And it's called She Flew the Coop. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to get traction and get it out there. It's about women who essentially did what I did, who jumped, took a risk, follows 4 women. And so we're in the beginning stages, but, you know, trying to get interest. So how do we do that?
Sure, I could take a first stab at it. You may want to follow up as someone who's been through the ringer too, but and I use those words specifically because a crowdfunding campaign is like a microcosm of entrepreneurship. You're going to have to very quickly communicate online who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. You actually did that naturally just right now, which is great, which is an indicator that you kind of are an excellent expert communicator. But also you'll want to figure out what networks you have direct access to, what networks may share your mission, and start to set the chessboard, so to speak, for a promotional strategy and game plan, right? So if there's 3 pillars that make crowdfunding work, the first one is awesome project spearheaded by awesome person that's telling a great story. Second thing is the network, right? How do I get this to the networks that matter and get them excited about funding it and sharing it and giving feedback? It's not just, hey, give me money. And then the third thing is kind of what am I offering through this pre-sales crowdfunding event, right? They can maybe get a copy of the movie or go to a screening of the movie or hang out with the cast or hang out with you or do a workshop with you, or there's all sorts of things that folks can offer in exchange for funds, but you want to make sure those things are valuable to the audience that you're speaking to. And it may make sense for Kate to ring in. As I said, she did a campaign and did pretty well with it.
The other question I was going to say is, in addition to the crowdfunding campaign, is there a way to get in front of brands who might be interested in women's empowerment and who might be willing to help fund the documentary?
Well, so I'll start off with the crowdfunding piece of it. I think the most important thing to know about that is just because you put it up on the platform doesn't mean that lots of strangers are going to filter in and come from the universe and fund your project. It's really important to be very strategic. It's like planning a party. You have to make sure your core friends are going to be there for you and are going to come. So yeah, before you launch it, make sure you know who's going to be your first funders to get the ball rolling. I did a series of real life events where I would play the video and I would have people from all different walks of life there. Made it a big party, and for me it was really uncomfortable to ask for money. I had never really done that before, especially asking for money from friends and people I knew. But one of the guys at one of my parties was like a professional fundraiser, and he literally like locked all the doors and like made everybody in the room commit. It was very dramatic. I was very uncomfortable, but it was very helpful. I would say that one thing about crowdfunding is it gives social sanction to people to also give you money. It's kind of this way that people like get, and it takes some of the awkwardness out of it. Yeah, it helps you. Like, I just went to lunch with a bunch of people last week, and I was explaining what I was doing, and one of the women said, "Oh, yeah, I donated to that." So once you have your core of people, you realize they start sending it out, and it goes sort of the outer circles of people who might still be in your network. They're not coming from Nowheresville. They're still people who are friends of friends of friends, but they start coming in, and that's when it becomes really successful. I would say once you get it up and you have your video and you show traction, then you can go to a big brand or a corporation and say, look, I've got something special here. I've got my own community of people that you can reach if you come and sponsor me.
Okay, great. We're about 12% funded. She Flew the Coop. It's on Kickstarter, though. So thank you.
Rock it up. So I have a question. Let's say I have an idea for an app. Do I start talking about it, or do I keep it close to me and hide it from everybody until I'm ready? Chris?
Yeah, that's Startups 101 right there. Anyone who thinks they have an idea that they shouldn't tell in fear of someone stealing it, you need to do a 180 and flip, because that's the worst way to go about launching an idea. Getting feedback from every single person on the planet is the best thing you can do. Go talk to like a homeless guy on the street. He can give you feedback. I'm dead serious. Every single person on this planet has a story, has a very interesting experience on their own. They can provide totally different perspectives. I get feedback from my 5-year-old niece sometimes compared to my professor, my own professor at my university. Everyone provides you with different types of feedback. You obviously take everything with a grain of salt, but it's all about pitching, pitching, pitching. Always be pitching is the phrase, whether it's the friends, family, colleagues, etc. And something you mentioned earlier about reaching out to brands that might be able to help you, just go on LinkedIn. It's all about your network. You look up a brand, I guarantee at least half of those brands you have at least a mutual connection to. And that's what I've done over the last few months myself. Once we made a change in our business model, was instead of being our own app, we're partnering with organizations. So we've met with ESPN and other big-time publications, and those are all through my own personal networks. It's just getting your foot in the door. You sit down with someone, and you're prepared, and you know what you're doing, they're gonna see that, and they're gonna pass you along to their boss, and then you start beginning the process of building those personal relationships with the people and also with the company itself as a potential client. So get your idea out there, get a landing page, get people to sign up even if it's not real. A lot of people do that in startups. There's a lot of just testing back and forth all the time. So I just say, build something. Don't just talk. You got to do it, and that's really what separates people with just ideas and people who do something about it.
And be ready to be flexible, right? Because your idea that you have today is going to probably be very different from the time when it goes up live. Like one of the trivia that I've learned is that, for example, YouTube. We all know YouTube, right? It's the video site. It started out as a dating site. It was what they wanted to do. YouTube started out as a dating site because people would get on there and do little videos about who they're about. It turned into YouTube. So
I just got to add something there too, based off what you're saying, is that everyone has an idea. You might think it's the greatest idea, and it could be eventually, but you can't be married to that singular idea in your head. That idea is going to take you through changes, through twists and turns, and you're going to wind up somewhere and be like, wow, this company that I'm running right now is totally the opposite, or has nothing to do with the original idea I had. But the original idea is what got you there. As you continue to follow up and make feedback, people who go to get feedback and then they're like, oh, well, I don't like what he said, I'm going to stay with what I'm doing. You stay married to your idea, you're most likely going to fail. And I look back on the decisions I make today or ideas I have today. Sometimes you look tomorrow and I look back and say, wow, we made a huge change on that. So pivoting is what we call it. You pivot all the time, you make changes all the time. And I think that's the key thing, is just being fluid, being able to adapt, because it's all about the success of the company at the end of the day. It's not about the success of your idea. And the success of the company is going to ensure your success, because obviously you're the founder and you're a huge part of it.
I just want to complicate that though, because even though I agree with everything you just said, I think there is something about staying true to what got you excited about it in the first place, because you're going to get so much conflicting advice from different people who a lot of times are just echoing, conventional wisdom or something that has been true in the past. But the reason that you're in this position and they're not is because you do have this pioneering spirit, and you're more likely. I like the phrase you used at one point earlier this morning about seeing where the waves are breaking.
Yeah, so I'm a surfer, and I like to look where the waves are breaking. Okay, they're not breaking over there, they are breaking over there, and they paddle out and see what I can find.
Right, so if you have that kind of vision, not everybody does. So you have to stay true, and even though people are telling you it's a crazy idea and it won't work for all these different reasons, you have to.
Yeah, and by no means am I saying listen to everybody either. Obviously people are going to give you, you can get really bad feedback from some people. But it's still good to get that, because it's all part of getting everyone's perspective, in your mind. And by changing your idea, I'm not saying that you're starting off with a website, then you move to an app or something, a big change like that. But it's just making little small changes along the road. We call them iterations, and those small changes along the road really get you to where you need to be in terms of, do we have the right revenue stream in place to make this a successful company? Do we have the right go-to-market strategy? Do we have the right user acquisition strategy? Those are all little things that have to be added to your idea. And the ideas you have for those strategies are probably going to change over time, because we all can't be business experts, market experts, journalists. You can't be everything at once. You have to focus on what you're good at and go from there. So I say, take everything with a grain of salt, but always just strive to get as much feedback as humanly possible.
So Janelle and I were producers. I've worked for CNN as well, helped start Current. Yeah, there you go. We've produced network reality series, unscripted stuff, etc. Those are big projects, and they take a long time to get off the ground, etc. Two-part question. One for you: have you seen any media startups work through Rocket Hub, or is it specifically just specific projects like specific documentaries or films, etc.? And then secondly, how do you monetize your new effort? Is it something where people pay a membership, and is it just in New York, or are you expanding, etc.?
So the first one is, what are the success stories that have come through? Yeah, I mean,
in terms of media,
Or can we broaden it to even kind of creativity, and because I think that the discovery mechanism that crowdfunding enables can be more important than the funding that people raise. So for example, I play in a band. I don't want to brag, but I'm a pretty awesome ukulele player. Just throwing it out there. Octavio's actually been to a show or two. He's awesome. And I have a guitar player. So I raised funds on my platform. I raised like $7,000 to make a record, and was really proud of that. And my guitar player at the time wanted to make an Armenian progressive folk album. And he said, can I use, this is in the early days of crowdfunding, he goes, can I use crowdfunding to do this? And I said, yeah, I think so. And he wanted to raise $3,500. So he raises $3,500 over the course of a month or something like that, which was a big win for him, and they actually proved that there was a market for this niche of a niche of a niche. But that campaign gets passed along to somebody who is working with Lou Reed. This is obviously before he passed away. And Lou Reed was looking for a new guitar player, and he sees Aram doing all this weird stuff with his guitar. So I get a call from Aram saying he's on his way to go try out for Lou Reed, to rehearse. He got a call from somebody saying, I saw you on Rocket Hub, and Lou Reed saw it, and he wants you to come audition for him. So Aram's on the phone with me. He's like, I don't even really know these songs that well, but they said they wanted me down there the next day. I'm freaking out. And I said, you're gonna do fine. He goes, well, worst case scenario, I got a chance to audition for one of my heroes, an icon. And I said, well, let me know how it goes. And he calls me back almost immediately, and he says, well, about 3 minutes into the audition, Lou just cuts him off and says, you're done. You're in the band. So he went from playing in my band to 1 a.m. shows to 50 drunk hipsters in Brooklyn to going on tour as Lou Reed's last guitar player. They played in front of 10,000 people a show, and it changed his whole trajectory. I mean, he barely returns my calls now, right? He's with Diana Krall, he's doing all this other stuff. But the discovery mechanism can be really, really big. And even the big hits, the ones that raise a lot of money through our platform and others, if you talk to them about what the thing that really helped catapult them was this sense of momentum, where you have people coming to you wanting what you have, and you've validated that in the market. You've got a lot of people just opening doors for you because they want to be a part of what you're doing. So, if you're going to do the crowdfunding thing, no, it's not for the faint of heart. I'm the first to tell you it's work. It's hard work because it makes you focus on telling a story and promoting that story. But it also comes with benefits beyond just raising money, too.
Yeah, so my financial model, is that the question? So I have been trying to be a purist about it. I really want to avoid the advertising-based model because it's kind of a race to the bottom at this point. Or if you are going to have a sustainable business, you have to be kind of a backdoor creative agency where you're really actually producing, advertising for big corporate brands. So I have decided to make my financial model based on alcohol. So it's all about, that's why we open the doors to the bar at night and we invite other people in. So it's about 20% memberships and 80% cocktails at this point. I feel like I might have to compromise a little bit and look for big sponsorships for a series we do. We do something called Conspiracy Night, where 3 people get up and pitch a conspiracy that they're working on, and people can grill them and tell them why it will never work, or they can offer to join them. So I think that there are potentials there. Of course, again, I'm coming at this with a bunch of idealism, so I want to be very specific about my partnerships and make sure that they don't lead to a corrupting influence. But I think private events, the sponsorships, the memberships, and the bar sales are what is going to make us independent from this, again, just race to the bottom of trying to, get the clicks. So that's my plan. And yeah.
We have 5 minutes, so there's one question here, and hopefully maybe we can get to your question. So.
I'm little, so I'll stand. So Brian, well, thank you all for being here. But Brian, I had a question for you. So I have gone through the intestinal heartache of a crowdfunding campaign and 5 years putting a film together, and it's a wonderful experience, but it really does become sort of an additional career to handle the social media load and really engaging with your audience. So in the successful campaigns that you've seen and models, what would you suggest, and what have you seen as the best way for people to stay engaged with their audience? Because, you know, it's a little hard being a filmmaker and a social media expert and a marketing person and a PR person.
Right, the common thread there, though, is communicating, right? So, you know, I've always said, always love your audience, build your audience, you know, and give them something that's interesting that they want. So, you know, whether you're a filmmaker, a writer, a musician, you know, a social media maven, at the end of the day, your job is really simple. It's to shift people's emotional states. Because people fund stuff that gives them an emotional response. They share things online that give them an emotional response. And that's simple to say, not easy to do, right? But if you look at the stuff that you share, for example, you know, the stuff that you share online is probably something that either reflects your own online identity or is something that moved you, that you thought was interesting and relevant. And it's not an afterthought anymore. And I'm saying this as an old school, you know, musician that came up in the 90s. I mean, I'll never forget, when I first moved to New York City, I took a social media workshop. It scared the heck out of me. And I was the guy in the back of the room going, oh, this is awful. I got to share stuff on, you know, Twitter and Facebook. I wasn't even a member of those sites at the time. And the lady who was running, Ariel Hyatt, who was one of my early mentors with Rocket Hub, said, if you don't get involved in social media and really kind of master this, there'll be opportunities that just pass you by. And I think that it's really, I took those words to heart and started to you know, get active on social media. I launched Rocket Hub like 9 months later. I saw the writing on the wall. But I would say that if we're in the communication business, then we really need to get a firm handle on how to communicate through the popular channels, which right now it's social media. And really having a focus on what your audience wants, what's relevant to them, how do you serve them. You know, I love the app that Chris is working on, because it's the whole visual snack-sized content thing is really, really, I think, you know, it's booming and will continue to boom. But really, I think that's the question, is how do you engage people online? How do you shift their emotional states, get them excited about what you're doing?
I have one more question.
To expand a little bit on the questions that have been asked, when you are looking to fund not a documentary, not something short-term, but something long-term, are you finding that you have to comply with more formalities, like give more information, for example, more like a business plan or things of that nature? And the other question is, for long-term projects, how long does the crowdfunding campaign continue?
Right, so I'm going to answer a little bit of this and hand over to Chris, who's had investors in his venture. Because think of the funding landscape as it's a pretty wide landscape. You have, you know, crowdfunding, kind of the entry level. It's something that's fairly quick and easy to get up and running on. You have angel investors, which are folks that usually come in around anywhere from, you know, 20, 50, 100 grand a pop, you know, investing in your endeavor. Then you have institutionals that come in later. They're giving more money for endeavors that are typically a little further along. Then you have sponsorships. You know, there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different ways to kind of raise capital. So I kind of look at, first of all, where are you in the process? Are you at the early stage? You know, do you have a minimal viable product yet, or is it just a prototype? Is it just an idea? Then it's probably a crowdfunding. You know, you probably have a thesis for crowdfunding. Are you up and running? Do you have some revenues? Do you have some traction? Then that might be a good time to go out and kind of pitch angels or incubators or those types of things. And then I'm going to hand it over to Chris to kind of ring in on some of the other methods that he's used, because he's been very successful and very fast with getting traction with his.
Yeah, I think just off that, you know, there's a lot. Crowdfunding is a great platform. It might not be for everybody, but there are other routes. You know, you have at the very early stage, you have seed accelerators, which if you guys don't, if not everyone's familiar with accelerators, they can invest anywhere between $20,000 to over $100,000 for a very small ownership percentage of your company. Sometimes they're investing in just an idea, or sometimes just the person. And on top of that, you go there and you work with the program usually for 3 to 6 months. They pair you with mentors in the executive space who know exactly how to help you. Workshops, it's a very hands-on, intense experience. It's more than just an investor hand you a check. They're really helping you. They know the process. They've done it with startups in the past. So definitely look for those. There's specific accelerators that are a certain niche that go maybe education, maybe fashion. You know, Disney has an accelerator, for example. There's lots of brands with their own. And then grants, for example. We competed for the New You entrepreneurship, Minority News Entrepreneurship Grant. We won that back in February. That was $20,000, equity free, which was great, and it helped us continue to develop our product. And now, we're starting to look at angels, and there's VCs. But if you have a product or even a prototype, and you have a good idea, maybe you have some users on a website, some traction, accelerators are a great way to go. And there's tons of them out there. They're international. They're here in the U.S. You can basically pick and strategize where you want to go and try to get in. Work your network on LinkedIn, see who runs those programs, and really try to let them know that you're that perfect fit. And investors on any level, from seed to VCs that fund big money, they always tell you that they invest in the person. That you might have a great idea, but they're really looking at you and the team, and how does your passion and expertise fit your idea. I think that's often the most important thing of getting that first check in the door from an investor.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna be wrapping up, but I was looking to ask for some final thoughts. So go ahead and.
I just want to say there's a big difference between having a tech product that's scalable, where you can go in. You don't need a business plan. Business plans are considered old-fashioned at this point in the tech world. They're investing in him. They're investing in his pitch deck. It's all bigger and faster. I think with a project like mine, which is like real world, it requires a lot of capital investment up front. I have a 20-page business plan, and I'm talking to some old guys who are happy to see old-fashioned business plans. So I think it really depends on what world you're in and who you're talking to.
I just have to add that there are accelerators out there for specifically media startups. It doesn't have to always be a tech platform, so look into those if you're interested as well.
Oh, in terms of final thoughts, I guess, assuming everyone here is kind of on the brink of doing their next big thing, is I would say two things. Do something that you really feel like matters, that you feel like you're adding value in the marketplace, something that excites you, because the passion is really the fuel for this game. The ups and the downs are going to happen, but if you're loving what you're doing, that really makes a huge difference. And the second thing is make sure you have a good band. And what I mean by that is I play the ukulele, but I don't want 3 other ukulele players around me. I want like a bass player that's going to keep the groove, right? Maybe that's my operations guy. I want the drummer that's going to make sure that we stay on time. Maybe that's the technical CTO kind of guy. And maybe I want a flashy guitar player that's going to help me sell, right? Think of your founding team as almost like a band where you come together and you're like U2. Like individually they're okay, but together they're U2. They're pretty impressive. So think about that type of dynamic when you're building your team. And I've also found that the better your team and the more exciting your team is, the more success you'll have there too.
Great. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I think we could have been here for 3 days straight if we wanted to, talking about this. But I encourage you all to go out and find your band and rock it.